Hi, and welcome back to the Night. Of course, in this exciting chapter, we're going to look at the Quickstarter. So we'll try to get you set up and ready to face 1e4 with the Knight in just, I don't know how long, but a very short amount of time. So let's not waste any and start from the start. First move, e4. Now we play the Sicilian, c5. We'll look at the sidelines later. First, the Knight f3, d6, d4. White's going for the open Sicilian, cd4, knight d4, and knight f6. In the e4 pawn, knight c3, and now the move a6. And this is the Knight. We are preparing the move e5 with the move a6, as you know if you had watched the introduction. So now White has a bunch of options. Let's start from the start. The most popular moves is the move bishop g5. Very risky, but a very exciting variation. Here I recommend e6. There are of course sidelines in the designated chapter, but here we look at 4, by far the main move. Now I recommend bishop e7. I'll recommend the setup with 3 pieces, bishop e7, queen c7, and knight b7. And the move order is very important. So we start with bishop e7. Now with queen e2, we have h6, bishop h4, knight takes e4 tactic, bishop e7, knight c3. So both queens are hanging. It's an important tactic. That's why White goes queen f3 almost exclusively. Now we play queen c7. It's important to start with queen c7. Knight b7 allows bishop c4. So we go queen c7. Now White castle is long. We play knight b7. And here there are two main moves, bishop to d3 and g4. Bishop d3 first. And this is a very big theory. Here we go b5. Now White has different ways of preparing the knight d5. Sacrifice h1 is the right way to start, bishop b7. And here there are options, but the most popular move is queen g3. Now we go b4, forcing the matters. h6 is also possible. It's an alternative covered in the chapter on the bishop g5 knight. Here after b4, White sacrifices the knight with knight d5, and after ed he has two ways of starting an attack. One is e5. Now we take on e5, fe5, play knight h5, keep this extra piece for now. Queen h4, bishop g5, queen g5, g6, and after e6, easiest is to play queen f4, going for an endgame as White will regain the piece. But knight c5 also forces a move repetition after ef, king f7, rook f1, king g8, knight e5, knight e6. White has to just deliver a perpetual check here with knight e5, knight h6. 14 e5, not very dangerous. 14 e takes d5 is the main move. Then we play king d8. Important to get out of the pin. Knight c6 check. Now we take on c6, d6. And there are options, but the easiest is queen takes c6. And White regains some material after bishop takes f6, knight takes f6. Bishop e4 is also in the position, so knight takes f6, queen g7, rook e8, and after queen takes f7, White is threatening rook takes e7, winning back some material. And the best we have is get this rook into play, rook a7, and after rook e7, queen f6, White is just exchanged down and has already 2 pawns in return, so he has enough material, but we are also doing very well. We play queen c5, follow it up with king c7. Our king is already very safe. And this is a balanced position. The kind of line you will see in the bishop d3 chapter, but this is actually the main and most important line to know. 10th, g4 is the most critical and the most often played move. Here I take a lot of time for these lines. I look at both options, the traditional b5 move and the one I recommend, the new or forgotten. Old and forgotten move h6. Here I'll just give you h6, and the point is after bishop takes f6, which is the main move, bishop takes f6, and now our bishop is very strong. And after h4, I propose a new concept that's not been played at the high level so far. I only got to play it once in an online game during one of my casual YouTube streams, so it's not even in the database. Here I recommend a new move, knight b6. A very strong idea. The point is that after g5 we give up the bishop with bishop d4, rook d4, and now we play queen c5 first. It's important to start with queen c5 and not with bishop d7, not to give White time for bishop e2 and rook hd1. And after, for example, rook retreat, we go bishop d7. Next we go castle long, and our king is very safe, which is not always the case in the bishop g5 neither. So I was very happy to find this system, and more details obviously in the chapter. If White tries 13 bishop e2, being very clever after bishop d7, a good developing move. g5. Now if we take on d4, rook d4, queen c5, White plays rook hd1. which is something we want to avoid. But here we play bishop e7, keeping the bishop pair, and now best white has his g6. Now we take. The bishop on e2 is misplaced. White doesn't have the bishop h3 move, hitting the e6 pawn. He has to hit the pawn with the queen. And now after queen h3 we go long castle. It's the most important in these lines to get the king to the safety. So we do so. Knight e6, bishop e6, queen e6. Now just king d8. And if white grabs one more pawn with queen g6, we hit him with d5. And we want to simplify with queen takes f4 and then establish a strong bishop on f6. While if white goes for e5, we go d4. And after knight d5, we'll have all sorts of tricks. That, in short, is the 6 bishop g5 move. Of course, there's a lot more in the designated chapters, but that is the key takeaways. The next line I'd like to look at is 6 bishop e3. Another very popular system. Number one system at the highest level amongst amateurs. This is still slightly behind the 6 bishop g5, but still a very serious move to know. Here I recommend e5 in general. As you will see, whenever e5 is a good move, I will go for it, as opposed to, for example, the other concept with e6, which is the Scheveningen. So here we go e5, my favorite structure. And now knight f3 is a positional system. White wants to castle short usually. We play a simple move bishop e7, developing the bishop. And after bishop c4, white is trying to fight for the d5 square. Here I give two options, bishop e6 and castle followed by knight c6. But in the Quickstarter, I will recommend bishop e6. It's pretty simple. If white takes on e6, f e6, and then follows up with knight g5, and he has to, because if he does nothing, the pawn on e6 is a big upgrade. We control the d5 square. So knight g5 is the critical move. Queen d7, and now queen f3, followed by queen h3. Here we play knight c6. Also d5 is possible, by the way. It's in the chapter. Queen h3, we play knight d8, protect the e6 pawn. Next we want to push h6, and white is not in time to win material after bishop b6, h6. If long castle, we play short castle, bishop d8, hg. And if bishop d8 first, we take bishop d8. The knight on e6 is going to get trapped, and after long castle, bishop a5, and knight e6 is met by king f7, and otherwise we threaten already the c3 knight. I really like how the bishop from e7 got activated by d8. That is something we'll see in many different knight or positions, bishop from e7 going via d8. The most standard reply is knight bishop b3. Now there is one important nuance. We play knight b7 first, castle, and here it's very important, very important. Cannot stress it enough. Highly important. You know, in all these knight positions, not to blunder into this short castle, would lose on the spot to bishop e6, f6, knight g5, and e6 pawn is undefended. So this is something we should avoid, and we can do so by playing rook c8 here first. Now bishop e6, f6, knight g5. There is knight f8 move. And after queen e2, again, we don't go castle, we play queen c7. And now after rook f d1, we can already castle with queen on c7 and rook on c8. After bishop e6, f6, knight g5, we have the strong idea queen c4. And after queen c4, rook c4, knight e6, we play rook fc8. We threaten to trap the knight with h6 and then king f7. And if knight g5 back, we'll go h6, knight f3, and take the e4 pawn. Regaining the pawn and having a comfortable endgame as the king approaches the center. Don't complain that I speak fast here, please, because this is a quick starter. We're looking at all knight in one video. This is insane. Knight b3 on move 7. This is the main line. White's going for the so-called English setup. Queen d2, f3. Long castle, the English attack setup, excuse me. Very popular. It's become popular in the 90s, and ever since it's played on all levels, in the very top level, also amongst many club and amateur players. A very popular setup. I recommend bishop e7. It's easier for us to handle sidelines, particularly h3, as we will see in the h3, 6 move h3 order. We need our bishop on e7, and we keep the bishop on c8. Against the English attack with f3, we anyway develop the other bishop as well, with bishop e6. And now after queen d2, g4 first is the wrong move order because we hit him with d5. Right after queen d2, we stop g4 with the move h5. This is modern move. Particularly with bishop on e7, it's a pretty fresh system. Not so many high-level games, although already Magnus Carlsen played it on both sides, but it's still relatively fresh. And now there are three different options: a simple long castle, knight to d5, and bishop e2 first, followed by knight to d5. So long castle first, a very logical and a sensible move. I expect you to face it in a lot of games. very important position. So we go knight bd7, develop the knight here. This is the standard development scheme in the Najdorf. King b1, this most universal move. And now I recommend rook c8. Now we prepare to meet knight d5 with knight takes d5, e d5, and bishop f5, hitting the c2 pawn. And if white trades these bishops with bishop d3, we trade them, and we activate our other bishop. We're happy to trade these bishops, and if not, the bishop is doing a great job on g5. Next, we want to castle, perhaps push f5, or play on the queen side with queen c7, queen c4, or push the b pawn as well sometimes. All in all, knight d5 not very dangerous here. Two other ideas I'd like to briefly mention: h4, b5, now bishop g5, stopping knight b6. Knight b6 now is met by bishop takes f6. And we cannot regain with the bishop because the pawn on d6 is lost. Here I recommend the castle, a3, white stops b4, and here a very strong waiting move is rook e8. And there are some complications after g4 that you can find in the chapter, but all in all, it works out just fine for black. And finally, very popular plan after rook c8 to go h3. White intends to go bishop d3, so we go b5, always a useful move. Bishop d3, now white's ready for the g4 push. Of course, we stop it with h4. And now white switches to the f4 push. And here we should remain flexible, not castle just yet, as it allows rook g1, g4 plans. Play the useful move queen c7. And now we want to play knight b6. And depending on what white does, we either go knight b6, or if white goes rook h1, now we can castle, as the rook is misplaced here. The white can switch to rook g1, g4 ideas, but black will have already plenty of counterplay. You can find more again in the chapter on the English attack. 10 knight d5, another critical move. Now we take with the knight. I also give the riskier bishop takes d5 option as a funky way to mix things up in the chapter. After knight d5, e d5, we go bishop f5. Now white plays bishop e2. And here I give a very strong and very rare idea. The problem is if we castle and play knight d7, white has knight a5, which really cramps us a lot. We cannot play b6 because of knight to c6, and otherwise white gets b4, c4, potentially c5 advance. So this is a problem. Instead of castle, I recommend to first play a5, very strong inclusion. We want to push a4, of course, and if white goes a4, now we can castle, and play knight d7, and we have avoided this knight a5 bind, which is huge. And next we want to bring the knight to f6, push h4, start some counterplay on the king side and the center. And the main move here is f4, opening up the center. And after ef4, bishop f4, I recommend a strong new move, rook c8. It's complete novelty. And the idea is that after c3, knight f6, we start a strong counterplay against the d5 pawn. Very often we go bishop f4. Sometimes we pick it up. We also have usually a lot of play on the e-file. This is a very important and very exciting position, and you can find more details in the chapter. For now, important to know that a5, a4 inclusion is quite crucial. White can also try to be very clever, play 10 bishop e2. Now the idea is that if knight d7, knight d5, if we now play the same, knight d5, ed, bishop f5, then we get move orders after castle. We didn't have time to push a5, and now white goes knight a5. But here we take with the bishop on d5, e5, and play queen c7. We intend knight b6, hit the d5 pawn. c4 will not be possible there because knight will take the pawn. So white goes rook c1, anticipating knight b6, ready to meet it with c4. Here we can castle. If white tries to be clever with c4, we can push him anyway with a5, and after knight a1, let me just make these moves. In fact, we can go for knight h7, knight c2, queen d8 plan, intending bishop g5, trading these dark squared bishops. Always a good idea to trade the bishops and get control over the dark squares. White, in the meantime, will get his knight to b5, and it will be a very complex struggle. 14 castle is natural. Now we go a5 anyway. Now a4 can be met by knight b6. And after c4, we play h4, and we want to go knight h5, followed by... Depends actually on what white does. We might then push the f pawn to f5, and if white starts rerouting the knight to b5, which is what he usually does, we'll bring our knight to c5, bishop to d8, swing the queen over, get the bishop to b6. You'll find all of these exciting lines in the chapter, but all in all, I think this is a very, very interesting and exciting new way to play against the English attack. Now let's look at h3 system. h3 is also a major move intending the g4 push, or also this bishop e3, queen d2 or queen f3 long castle setups. Here I once again recommend e5. There are two options, knight b3 and knight de2, two main options. Sorry, knight b3, we play bishop e7. Now after bishop e3, we have transposed to 6 bishop e3, e5, knight b3, bishop e7, h3 move order. So there are two ways to reach this position. If h g4 first, we also play h6, and after bishop e3, we will transpose to a position we will see in a moment. Bishop e3, h6. Yeah, h6 is a very, very cool, rare idea that I would like to recommend. We are waiting for the move g4, anticipating it, and keeping our pieces super flexible. The bishop on c8 can sometimes be better located than on e6. After white goes knight d5, we take knight d5 ed, and then we don't have to drop back. So we actually, by playing h6 and waiting with bishop e6, often we win time, as you will see. For example, in queen f3, b5, on knight d5, we take knight d5 ed. So after g4, we play queen c7, always a useful move. Queen is doing a great job on the c file. Long castle, and now we hit him with b4, knight d5, knight d5, ed5. And now, yeah, we didn't have to waste time on bishop e6, bishop c8. So we'll play a5, followed by a4, knight d7. Lots of counterplay here on the queen side. b3 push is in the air. So, yeah, very complex position. Can lead to exciting lines. I can assure you, you can check out the chapter. I'll give you a little teaser here. Exciting stuff can be won. a4. After knight d2, knight d7, bishop b5, there are some very beautiful exchange sacks after rook a5, bishop c6, castle, knight c4, for example. Rook c5 is a typical exchange sack, bishop c5, knight c5. And yeah, we have beautiful control over the c5 square and f5. Very, very interesting stuff. Definitely check out the main chapter for the exact move orders and the details there. Knight queen d2 is clever. Now b5, knight d5 is a problem because knight d5, queen d5, rook will be hanging. So we go here, queen c7 first. And after long castle, we now play b5. And yeah, it's a very complex position. Now knight d5, queen d5 is no longer the issue. And position is very, very complex. You can see that in the h3 chapter. In knight g4, we'll transpose also to h4, g4, h6, bishop e3. And here I recommend the very funky line with b5. Now knight d5 is critical, and here bishop b6 is a threat. I propose to ignore it with bishop b7. That's a very, very, very exciting sacrifice. Bishop b6, queen c8, knight c7, king f8, knight takes a8, or knight takes 8. In fact, we can take the pawn on e4 first. So even more accurate for white is to play f3 first. And the exchange is anyway doomed. But after knight b7, knight e8, queen a8, we will capture the pawn on e4 after, for example, bishop f2, which is the main move. Bishop e4, we get a very fascinating position. We have a pawn for the exchange, but white king is weak. We have strong pawn center. Knight on b3 is very weak and poor. And we might get our h8 rook into the game with a timely h5 push, or sometimes g6, king g7. Get it via the 8th rank. So all in all, an exciting position. I think gives black very good practical chances. Objectively, it's also pretty good. The computers approve all that. So definitely a fun way to play. And of course, there's a lot more in the chapters. After e5, knight d2 is also possible with idea g4, knight g3. This is a major move, actually the most played move. And now the main theoretical move is h5, also the one I like to recommend. Stopping g4, a very strong concept. White has two ways of playing here, g3 and bishop g5. Bishop g5 is possible, fighting for the d5 square directly. We go bishop e6, intending knight d7. Now white takes, bishop f6, queen f6, and establishes a strong knight on d5. We play queen d8. Now white goes queen d3. This is the most dangerous modern setup. White wants to go long castle. And it's very complex. There are lots of options, but I will give you just the one line that happened in my game against Surya Ganguly when I was playing with the black pieces. I went knight d7, long castle, g6, king d1, natural move, knight to c5, queen f3, and now bishop g7, controlling the f6 square. And after knight ec3, I started my play on the queen side without castling yet. There's no need to castle. King is okay for now. On e8, I went b5. Surya Ganguly went bishop e2. Now I went through b8, hinting at b4. And after a3, I was well prepared here and knew a very strong regroup. Bishop to d7, support the b5 pawn, ready to push a5 with idea b4. And at the same time, if white, for example, is to ever go b4, we have this e6 square for the knight, and the knight from e6 will jump towards d4 or f4 if need be. So a very cool regroup, a very nice concept, and soon Surya, of course, facing this unpleasant queenside attack, landed in quite some trouble in that game. That is for 8 bishop g5. 8 g3 is most popular, intending to simply develop bishop g2 in castle. Now we develop the bishop to e7, bishop g2. I propose here to play b5, grabbing space on the queen side and not fearing knight d5. White has to go knight d5, otherwise this knight on e2 will be out of business. So knight d5. Now we take on d5, queen d5, and rook a7. The rook is all right here. In fact, after bishop e3, which is the main move, developing the piece with the tempo, I recommend rook b7. There's no need to be clever with bishop e6. The queen actually anyway needs to drop back to d2, and we might first develop the knight to f6 and keep the bishop on c8 for now. After queen d2, knight d7. Black is quite comfortable. Knight c3 with knight f6. We control the d5 square. We want to castle next. Develop the bishop to e6. Push on the queen side with before a5. And if white is to take bishop g5 takes f6, he'll have to deal with h4 when we'll fight also for dark squares on the king side. Of course, much more is in the chapter, but I think in short, this is more than enough to be able to handle the move h3. Next is the move bishop e2. One of the other major moves. It's played a lot on the high level and also amongst lesser experienced players, club players, amateurs. White wants to just simply castle short, modestly, without any sophisticated intent, and see what happens later. I recommend e5. And now knight f3 is a new little variation. We play bishop e7. Want to play bishop e6, knight b7 next. First bishop e6 allows knight g5. That would be a mistake. Play bishop e7. And now white goes bishop g5, fighting for the d5 square. After bishop e6, he takes on f6 before we have time for knight d7, reinforcing the knight. And after bishop f6, bishop f6, the main line goes castle, and knight d5. White grabs the square, knight d7, and now bishop c4, grabbing control over the d5 square. But now we play around it as so often in the knight of, and in particular here, I like a very exciting new regroup that's never been played before. That is queen c8, a very unusual idea, but a very clever one. We first hit the bishop on c4, and the point is to bring the bishop back to d8, which is a very cool regroup. After queen a2, we hit the bishop with b5, and after bishop comes to b3, we drop the bishop to d8. We want to hit the bishop with knight c5, and then we will bring the king to h8 and prepare the f5 push, undermining white's control over the e5 and d5 squares. A very exciting new idea, I believe. Main line is 7 knight b3, keeping the f pawn ready to be pushed to f4. We go bishop e7 here. By the way, bishop e6, which is supposed to be less accurate, is very interesting as well, and there is a chapter on that, just to give you an extra option against this popular bishop e2 system. But here, let's look at bishop e7, the main line. Castle. Now there are a few options. King h1 is very clever. White wants to wait for bishop e6 and then go f4. Here we don't play bishop e6 too early, we play knight c6, f4, and now rook e8, a very strong idea that I got to play against Hikaru Nakamura in an online tournament, rapid tournament 2020. And now f5 doesn't come with a tempo, the bishop is not on e6, and we counter quickly with b5, intending b4 and bishop b7, hitting that weak e4 pawn, and black has lots of counterplay as this pawn on f5 is weak, is overextended, and the e4 pawn black's protection. Another plan is rook e1. White wants to play bishop to f3 and bring the knight from b3 to d2, f1 and e3. Here I recommend bishop e6, bishop f3, and now of course black can just play knight d7 and it's also alright, but I recommend a very sophisticated and a clever idea. Queen c7, a move is of course a lot more rare than knight d7, but it has a very clever point. Whenever white goes knight d2, we now use the fact that we postpone the development of the b8 knight, excuse me, and we bring it to c6, and then if knight f1 to d4. So we wait for knight d2 with the knight on b8, and after a4 we play rook c8, we wait again, and only after bishop e3, now that the square is taken and knight d2, knight f1, knight e3 is no longer on cards, we play knight b7, and next we want to play on the queen side with rook a b8, eventual b5 push, and sometimes if knight goes to f1 g3 anyway, we regroup the bishop via d8 to this d8 a5 diagonal. Again, there's of course more details, but this is a short reference point. 9 bishop e3 is the main line, bishop e6. Now f4 is no longer so strong. After e4, white has to waste time with the bishop. Bishop takes f4. Then we play knight c6, and if king h1, we hit him with d5 and equalize on the spot. The two main moves here are queen d3, the new main line, and the old main line, queen d2. Queen d3 is the new main line. The idea is to play knight d5, get this very complex pawn structure that we have seen in the English attack as well. Knight d7, knight d5. Here we have to take with the bishop, otherwise the bishop gets trapped. It doesn't have any squares after knight takes d5. So we take with the bishop ed, and here I recommend a very cool idea played by Surya Shekhar Ganguly. And only him, there's just one game in the database, while there are thousands of correspondent games here, hundreds of high-level games. But Surya played this move h5, very cool idea, intending a knight g4 followed by f5, and if white plays h3, then this inclusion is actually in black's favor, as we will play on the king side with g6, followed by knight h7 or knight e8, and then eventual f5, bishop g5. The fact that white has played h3 is not helping him. He just created one more target, while our h5 move is a very useful move, gaining more space on the king side. After a4, knight h7, for example, followed by f5, bishop g5, black has excellent play on the king side and the center. If white ignores knight g4, we'll follow through with it after 13 a4, for example, grabbing space with a5 and then c4. That's how usually white pushes on the queen side. We go knight g4. Now, if bishop d2, we go f5, h3, and e4, hitting the queen. Wherever the queen goes, it will keep getting hit. For example, queen g3, there is bishop h4 ideas, and queen or f4, bishop h4 ideas. Queen c4, there is a knight g e5 ideas with a well-timed f4, f3 incoming. So this is very fun and exciting for black. Bishop c1 is a bit more cautious. Now f5 will be not so great because of h3, e4, and then queen comes to d1. Bishop on d2 was in the way, so this would be good for white. But now we switch to another plan. We trade bishops with bishop g5, h3. Now we take on c1, rook f c1, and knight g to f6 back. We have traded the dark square bishops and have a pretty comfortable position with good dark square control, both on the king side and also on the queen side, which is quite important. And the old main line 10 queen d2, intending some sort of an a4 a5 bind, is not giving white anything after knight bd7. Now we're ready to push b5, and if white plays a4, which is the main line, I propose a strong move, knight b6, which is a very direct solution. After a5, knight c4, we trade the knight for the bishop, bishop c4, bishop c4, and after rook of d1, we play first the useful move rook c8, and now white goes knight c1, which was the old theory. The point was that knight comes to d3 and b4, and white gets to control the d5 square, but it's not the case. There is a very strong thematic push, d5, a breakthrough in the center, and now if ed5, there is bishop b4. In fact, white should include bishop b6 first. Now we have to go queen e8. Now ed, there is bishop b4, when the d5 pawn will fall, and if knight d5, then knight e4, and yeah, we have gotten rid of this weak d6 pawn and have a very, very fine position. There are more details on that, but in short, this is a very good solution, of course, for the old main line. And I believe with that we cover the sixth move, bishop e2. Now let's look at the other moves. There are so many six moves, but that's what makes it fun. It's never a boring day if you are playing or studying the Najdorf. Cd bishop c4, a very risky line though, popular line especially on amongst amateurs and club players, but very risky line. The bishop on b3 is often out of play a little bit. We go here e6. It's important to get the move order right. If b5, there is bishop d5, so we go e6, and now main move is bishop b3. Now it's a very, very important moment. We don't play bishop e7 because it allows g4, but we play b5 first. Now g4 is met by b4 and e4 pawn is falling. And now I looked at two options here for the Quickstarter. Short castle, which is the old main line, and the attempts to go for some sort of a double-edged setup with queen e2, long castle, and f3. But this is not too great. We play bishop e7. We keep the bishop on c8 flexible here. g4 once again is met by b4, so that's not a problem. And if white plays queen e2, which is one of the setups, we castle. Now if f3, we hit him with b4 already when the knight doesn't have a comfortable square. On a4 there is bishop d7, and if a3, now white has wasted some time on a3, and we'll play bishop b7, making white waste one more move on f3. And now knight c6 followed by knight a5 and rook c8 gives black plenty of counterplay in case white castles long. And there are even some ideas of exchange sacrifice on c3, potentially bringing the other knight to c4. 8 short castle is the old main line. Now we go bishop e7. It's a little bit important after queen f3 here, which is the old move, not to go bishop b7 because of bishop e6, f e6, knight e6, and then we're losing one more pawn. It's very dangerous business. Instead, we play queen c7 or queen b6. My recommendation is queen b6, and after e5 there is the move bishop b7. So this is this indirect way of protecting against e5. If bishop e3, threatening knight e6, discovery on the queen, we drop the queen back to b7. Queen is fine here. And after queen g3, the pawn is not even hanging yet. We first kick the knight before knight a4, knight d7. Grabbing on g7 is too risky for white. We go rook g8, and then knight g4, and have plenty of counterplay. And if white goes the modest f3, we simply castle, intending knight e5 and bishop d7 next. And I don't see any danger here. Bishop on b3 is actually out of play. It doesn't do much, and the pawn on f3 is not very aggressive. So white's setup is quite passive, and black's doing quite well here. That's for bishop c4. Next in line is the move g3. White wants to fianchetto the bishop to g2 and just castle, a solid and a safe way of playing. We go e5. Again, as I told you, whenever we can go e5, we do go e5. I love these structures. I will make you love them too. Knight d2 and knight b3 are two main options. Knight b3, I recommend bishop e7, bishop g2. Castle. Here I give two options with b5 and bishop e6, but I'd like to show bishop e6 here, very similar to the system with bishop e2 and bishop f3, just small differences actually here. A4, now we can play the same way with queen c7, rook c8, waiting for bishop to come to e3, but I would like to show one other idea. Knight b7, rook e1, queen c7, allow knight d2, and now a very strong regroup, activating the e7 bishop, queen c5, knight f1, intending knight e3, going for the d5 square. Now bishop d8, knight e3, bishop a5, activating the bishop, a very important idea to always pay attention to. And after bishop d2, rook a8, I had a comfortable position in my game against Wei, which happened in Vaikanze 2016. So an idea that I myself employed and something I definitely recommend. After e5, 7 knight d2 is also possible. White wants to trade one knight with knight d5 and bring the other to c3. We play bishop e7, bishop g2, and here it's possible to castle first and then go b5. But I like to recommend b5 right away with a very funky point after knight d5. White has to play knight d5, otherwise we go knight d7, bishop b7, and then the e2 knight will be out of business. So knight d5 is important. And now we yes, trading and rook a7 is something we do with pawns on h3 and h5. And here it's a little different. We don't have this h4 ideas later. So here I recommend knight b7. At the same time, compared to positions with h3, h5, now whenever white takes and goes bishop g5, we have this move h6. So these are the subtle differences. White goes knight e3, reinforcing this knight, finally solving the issue of the bad knight. But now we trade one knight, knight takes d5, knight d5, trade the other knight f6. And if we trade all the knights, there will be no knight that can land on d5 square, a simple idea. And if white grabs the bishop, we can take with the queen, of course, but I like the new move, king takes e7. That's why we postponed castle, to get this extra option. I think a very funky option. The queen will be well positioned on c7, bishop comes to b7 or e6, and the h8 rook will get into the game to d8 or c8, and the king can always go back to f8 if need be. If castle, queen c7, yeah, white doesn't really have a way to open up the position. And if bishop g5, as I said, without h3, h5 included, we simply have the move h6. And after bishop f6, we can even go for a short walk with the king, take with the king on f6. Then we can always come back to e7 or even king g6, king h7 when, yeah, we're doing very fine. And we have the good bishop here. And there is no piece that will enjoy the d5 square. That is for g3. I am looking here at the list because I would like to present the 6 moves in the same order with which the chapters are arranged, and that's why I am sometimes taking a look here at my notes that give me the right order. 6a4 is the next move, a very positional line. White wants to stop potential b5, and White has opened his cards, showing that he will castle short with a pawn on a4. Of course, long castle plans are out of the window, as this will be too big a target for black. So after e5, White goes knight f3, and after bishop e7, White's idea is to develop the bishop to c4 and g5 in one go, compared to bishop e2 or bishop e3, knight f3 systems. Yeah, and yeah, bishop c4, we play bishop e6. These similar positions, once again, don't have to blunder into knight d7 castle, and then bishop e6, fe knight g5. This is the only thing to be aware of. Of course, more details are in this chapter on 6a4, but a bishop g5 is the other move. Now after bishop e6, White wants to take, play knight d5, and get bishop to c4 in one go. Here we'll fight for the d5 square with knight d7, and after bishop c4, yeah, we should go rook c8, get a free tempo on the bishop here. And now there are a few options for White. Main 2 options are queen e2, queen d3, and against both of these moves we play knight b6, when White has a choice either to trade the knights with knight b6, queen b6, bishop e6, fe6. Now we control the d5 square, but White is hoping that his knight on f3 is a better piece than our bishop on f6, which might seem like the case just now, but it will soon not be the case. After c3, protecting the b2 pawn, castle, we have a strong move, queen c6, and the strength of this move is not in the move itself, but in the idea behind it. The idea is to go bishop to d8 and then to b6, and then it will be the question which of the light pieces, the knight or the bishop, is actually more active. So very complex double-edged position that I believe is fine for black. If knight f6, queen f6, bishop 6, queen e6, this is a typical position from this line. Many games have been played. It's around balanced. White doesn't have good control over the d5 square. Knight on f3 is far away from that. And in the long run, black will go for the d5 or the f5 push. But probably first he would like to reroute his knight from b6 either to d7 c5 or to f6. All in all, a fine position. Of course, it is studied in much more detail in this chapter, but in general, not something to be to worry about. 6 move bishop d3 is a sideline that hasn't been too popular, but recently the rise of it in popularity has been enormous. There have been lots of high-level games, lots of new ideas for White. So I have spent a lot of time in the designated chapter studying it. Here I'll give you some of my findings. e5 is what I recommend. Knight d2. The knight on e2 is very well placed. That's the idea. White wants to push f4 or bring the knight to g3, depending on how we develop. I recommend to go bishop e7, although there are alternatives, but I recommend just a simple bishop e7 castle. And now it's possible to go bishop e6 first when critical move is f4, and e4, knight f4 positions are studied in the chapter. But I recommend here the main move, castle. Now f4 is a little pointless. There is no f5 push, so we'll get counterplay with knight d7, b5 setups. Then bishop comes to b7, and we pressure the e4 pawn. White usually goes knight g3, and the idea is that after bishop e6, which is my recommendation, developing the bishop harmoniously, intending knight d7, White has knight d5. And now if you take that twice with knight d5, e5, bishop d5, White will regain the pawn with bishop takes h7, king h7, and king takes d5. This is also not clear and also analyzed in the chapter. I give basically 3 systems against bishop d3 just to give you a full overview. But that is quite double-edged, and bishop d5, ed g6 is the main line, more reliable. g6 to stop knight f5. Next, black wants to play knight d7. Now main move is c4. White has the majority on the pawn majority on the queen side, and after knight b7 we get a very interesting position that I talk about a lot in the chapter there. Usually we get these structures with the knight on b3, but here with knight on g3 we are more inclined to go for the rook b8 b5 push, as the knight is much further away from the a5 square. So here, yeah, usually rook b8 b5 is the plan after, for example, king h1, rook b8. b3 is a reinforcing move, reinforcing the c4 pawn, and after b5, just to mention, if white goes a4, we can block the dark squares with a5. And after b3, b5, if white goes f4, it's always a double-edged sword. After e4, bishop f4, white has gained a semi-open f-file, but we do have access now to the e5 square, where the knight is potentially very strong. After queen e2, knight f7, yeah, the strong knight combined with counterplay against these pawns, c4 and d5, make for a complex but a pretty decent position for black. The most played move is turning bishop h6. Now we play rook e8. Bishop f8 now is an idea, and after rook c1, bishop f8 is possible, but I recommend knight c5, which is the main move. And if the bishop draws back, intending b4, now we play a5, ready to meet a3 with a4. And if white goes b3, intending a3 before anyway, then we play rook b8, ready to meet a3 with b5, not allowing white to get his pawns rolling. And position is very unclear. f4, for example, is leading to complications after bishop f8, and this is analyzed in the chapter. But all in all, black gets pretty good play on the dark squares, and a pretty healthy positions are ensuing there. That's for bishop d3. Next up is the move f4. There are people who play the move f4. It's not too dangerous, but it's definitely there. It has its own fan base. We play e5. When bishop is not on e6, pawn on f4 is not so dangerous, as f5 is not really coming with the tempo. But here white's idea is to bring the knight to f3. Knight is harmoniously placed behind the pawn. Yeah, hitting e5 pawn, but we'll defend it with knight d7. We want to push b5. White usually goes a4, stopping b5. And here I recommend a very clever move order, a very much more rare move than the alternative, the move queen c7. Mostly people play bishop e7, but that allows bishop c4 option, which is quite dangerous. So queen c7 is very strong, stopping bishop c4. And now after bishop d3, we develop bishop e7, castle, castle. King h1 is always a useful move in these positions when the pawn is on f4 and it's diagonal. a7, g1 is wide open. And here the knight comes to c5, another point of queen c7. The e5 pawn is well protected. And after queen e1, which is the main plan, bringing the queen to g3, we play rook e8. The rook in these neither of positions is very often very well placed on e8. It's not immediately obvious why, but once some kind of complication starts, or some ef starts, or knight d5 happens, then always the rook on e8 turns out to be very, very important. So rook e8 is a very good move here. White takes on e5. Usually, if queen g3 directed, there is knight h5. So white usually takes on e5, d plays queen g3. And now I recommend a strong pawn sacrifice, bishop e6. White has to take with the queen. If knight takes knight h5, he's losing the knight, as the queen is hanging. Queen e5 is main. Now we go bishop d6, kicking the queen away. After queen g5, we play h6, queen h4, and knight g4. And now we get a very interesting position, which is very good for black. At first, it seems that we are a pawn down. Okay, we are a pawn down, but we have plenty of compensation. h3 is always spent by bishop g3, so that's not a thing. We have good control over the e5 square, and we have pressure on the d3 bishop and the e4 pawn. And next, we want to play rook a d8, and eventually knight takes d3, followed by bishop e7 will win the d3 pawn. So it's very hard for white here to defend from that, even though he has a move. Yeah, there is no really a good follow-up, and black is already actually slightly better here. Now we are moving on to obscure lines that still are played across all levels. So there are many 6 moves, as I mentioned. So 6 rook g1 is one such. White intends a very direct, brutal g4 push, but of course a very committal move, playing a move with the rook so early in the game. But it's actually quite interesting. I recommend e5, once again knight b3, intending g4, and here I give 2 recommendations. One is a simple bishop e6, g4, and then d5, which leads to an endgame. And I also recommend a more playful move h5, a little more double-edged, and that's what I will give here in the Quickstarter. Now if white plays h3, we play bishop e6. If g4 now, then we definitely take and play d5, and with the rook on h-file open, we have an even more comfortable endgame. And if white plays bishop e3, some sort of English attack setup, we will play, of course, knight d7. And we have our usual b5, rook c8, knight b6 business on the queen side. very unclear play, and of course there's much more details in the chapter. 8 bishop g5 is also principled. Bishop is sitting on a weakened g5 square. Now we again develop the usual scheme: bishop e6, knight d7, and b5. Queen d2, intending long castle, knight b d7, long castle. And here I studied this position in quite some depth and came to the conclusion that it's very interesting to postpone bishop e7 and go for direct b5. And now with the f4, which is the main move, now to go b4, forcing the matters. And after knight d5, there is knight takes e4, bishop d8, knight takes d2. Some kind of an endgame ensues, and the endgame is fine for black. After bishop a5, bishop d5, rook d2. We play bishop e6, and if bishop takes b4, regaining the pawn, we take on f4 with a very complex and balanced endgame. Alrighty, that is for rook g1. I also have a chapter which covers queen moves. Let's go briefly over those. Queen f3 is not a good move. White prepares for e5, knight f5, and for e6 he's ready to go g4. But now the dragon setup is very good. The queen is very badly placed on f3, surprisingly. After bishop e3, bishop e3 can play bishop g7, but white usually starts with h3 because he anyway needs to stop knight g4 or bishop g4 eventually, as he intends to go bishop e3 and long castle. h3 we go bishop g7, bishop e3, castle, castle. Knight c6. Now the queen on f3 is very badly placed because compared to the queen on d2, white doesn't have this bishop h6 idea, trading this strong bishop. And here knight c6, bc e5 is met by knight d5, when we'll sacrifice pawn happily to open all these files and diagonals. And if white plays g4, because what else? We play bishop d7, simply intending knight e5, sorry, rook c8, rook takes c3. And if queen g2, intending to meet that with f4, we switch to the b5 idea. b5, f4, f4, what else? b4, knight d5, and a5. And our queenside play is a little more to the point. After a4, we already have some b3 ideas, whereas white's expansion is not really clear what it has brought him. So queen f3, g6 is a very good dragon for black. The other mediocre queen move is queen e2, also not very good. We hit him with e5. Knight f5 is the only way to make sense of it. It seems optically pretty interesting. White wants to go bishop g5 long castle, but it doesn't quite work for white. We push d5 here, the typical response. Knight is now attacked, so we get time for d5. Bishop g5, now we get to push d4. Long castle, it all seems to make sense. White is pinning our queen. If we play knight c6, next we want to play queen a5. And after f4, queen a5, complications ensue, but they are very good for black. fe5, dc3, ef6, all natural. Now we go bishop e6, threatening cb2, and then checkmate is there. And complications, they just are heavily in black's favor, and black is almost winning here. So queen e2 is not a very good idea. The best of the queen moves is queen d3. Here I recommend a very flexible and a very strong idea, knight b d7. We are waiting for white to play a4, stopping b5, after which we'll go g6. a4 is the declaration that white will not castle long, and if white doesn't castle long, then the dragon setups are always pretty healthy for black. Bishop e2 is more flexible, but then we have b5, and the point is that after a4, it seems that b5 was premature, but it wasn't, because we have knight c5 hitting the queen, and using the fact that the queen on d3 was placed there far too early. After queen e3, we have b4, and we win the e4 pawn simply. Knight d5, knight e4, of course. We have to trade the center pawn for this side pawn on b4. And if knight c6, white hitting the queen, we have a very strong concrete response, knight d5, hitting his queen in our turn. And after queen e4, knight f6 is possible, but I like queen c7. Queen d5 is now met by bishop b7. And then we pick up the knight. And if knight takes b4, move 13, which is the best move, knight takes b4, knight c2 is there, so white cannot take the rook. And after queen b4, we can play g6. We want to finish our development, and having a central pawn for the b pawn, we're doing quite well. So queen d3 is not a bad move, but not a great move either. And finally, there will be a chapter also on side moves, which is basically all the moves that haven't yet been mentioned. And let's mention them now. So first of all, the move a3. This idea was played by Magnus in Vikings 8 2017, a new idea. a point after e5 is to go knight f5. That's pretty cool, but black has ever since solved the problems. d5 is a typical response. Once again, knight on f5 is vulnerable. Bishop g5 is the idea. Now a3 is pretty useful in many lines, but we go d4, bishop f6. In the chapter on 6a3, I look at queen f6 in great detail, which is also fine for black. But here, I'll give the option of gf as main. Now, if white plays knight b1 or knight a2, we take on f5. But if white plays knight e2, heading to g3, well, there is not much use of the knight on g3 when the other one is still on f5 and the e4 pawn is still there. So here I propose queen b6, very strong move, hitting the b2 pawn. And the problem is if rook b1, then we have bishop a6, intending bishop a2, which is quite uncomfortable for white to meet. And he has problems with the b2 pawn. If he goes for something like queen c1, we can just develop with knight d7, rook c8, knight c5. Have very good position. If knight a2, we take on f5, e5, play queen d5. It's vital in these positions to control the e4 square. So more common is knight b1, intending knight d2, fighting for the e4 square as well. Now we take on f5, ef5, and play queen d5 again. And if white tries to, if he goes knight d2, there's bishop h6, of course. And if he goes for queen d3, intending knight d2, then we can bring our own knights to fight for the e4 square with knight d7, and now knight d2, knight c5. We have currently very good control over the e4 square. The queen on d3 is attacked, and this seems to be pretty fine for black. Again, very important to fight for this e4 square. It's all about that in this position. Sixth move. H4 is a trendy new move, and the idea is that, as I write here in the notes, that even this makes some sense. So yeah, it's possible. E6 would be horrible, especially because of g4, g5, when h4 is useful. But our e5 move is excellent here. Knight b3, knight f5, d5. I look at briefly also in the chapter. It's not very good. Black is very fine there. Knight b3 is main move. Now we play bishop e7. If bishop e6, which is the alternative, there is a 4 push, which is quite complex. Bishop e7 is what I recommend. Now white has two ideas, either to go for bishop g5 takes f6, fighting for the d5 square, or to go for bishop e2, threatening g4. So if bishop e2, intending g4, we have bishop e6. g4 is now met with d5, so white has to switch to plan B, f4. And now I recommend to go for complications with b5, intending b4. White goes for g4. He has beautiful kingside pawns, but he forgot to develop his queenside, so it's not so clear or double-edged. We go for b4, forcing the matters, knight d5, knight d5 ed, and now bishop c8 has been played, but I recommend a new exciting idea, bishop h4. Just grabbing the pawn, we can do that because after king f1, bishop c8, g5 doesn't trap the bishop because of bishop g3, and the bishop is more alive than ever. And if queen d3, intending g5, then we go g5, securing the h4 bishop. f5 here leads to a very complex position that I studied in the chapter, but the most obvious response is to take on g5. And after bishop g5, queen g5, queen is quite active on g5. We have queen f4 check. If need be, g4 pawn is hanging, so white should go queen d2, trading our active queen. And after queen d2, knight d2, we have a roughly balanced endgame. We can go rook g8, hit the g4 pawn, and we need to finish our development. And yeah, white has some compensation. You can play a3. He has compensation for the pawn, but it's all basically is enough for equality, but not more. That's for 8 bishop e2. 8 bishop g5 is also there after bishop e6, intending knight b7. White takes on f6 before we are in time to bring the knight to f6. And here white plays g3. He's reinforcing the h4 pawn, and these h4 g3 pawns help him guard the g5 square. So now we switch to another idea. We go bishop e7. The knight is heading towards f6, pawn towards b5. Queen d3 is the most dangerous move, I think. Queen d2, which is the most common move, is met by knight d7, long castle, knight f6. When after f4, we can play b5. Here it's better for white to have a queen on d3, to have some knight d5 ideas, and have e4 square, e4 pawn protected. After queen d3, we play knight d7, long castle, and now I recommend to postpone knight f6 for now and go for more direct plan with b5, f4, and now b4. And after knight d5, just take the knight queen d5 in castle, and here we have a very strong and a very direct threat of a5, a4 next, and I believe black is doing perfectly all right here. And finally, there is a move knight b3 back. The idea is to brace for e5, and then after e5, white goes bishop g5 directly. That would of course be foolish. Here I recommend to go for the Scheveningen setup with e6, the Scheveningen setup as they call it abroad. Now we allow white to go for g4, but the thing about this kingside pawn storm, it's much less effective with the knight on b3, not fighting for that crucial e6 square later on, so on d4 the knight would be just much better placed. So here we are doing quite well. After e6, g4, we play b5, start our own expansion, and after bishop g2, there are of course some sidelines like a3 and g5. There's some nuances that are covered in the chapter of knight b3, but here we look at bishop g2, bishop b7, g5, and now it's important not to get tempted by clever looking b4, because after knight d5, the complications lead to good position for white. This has been played in the first high-level game of knight b3, played between Bartel and Wojtaszek, but I proposed the simpler move knight f7, and the positions are fine for black after h4. I like this idea of Nepo to go b4. Jan Nepomniachtchi played it a couple of times, pushing b4 before developing the knight to c6. The idea is that after knight a4, now we have bishop c6, so white is forced to go to e2, and now black plays knight c6, and next he wants to play a5, bishop e7. And in general, there are different ideas here. So one is to go h6, undermining the kingside pawns. Now, without knight being on d4, this g6 reply is far less dangerous, and also sometimes e5 or knight b6 followed by d5, these kind of central pushes are there as well in the long run. So all these ideas are certainly there, and with the knight on b3, all of that makes a lot of sense for black. I believe with that we have covered all 6 moves in the knight, which is fantastic. And now we have some time to go over the sidelines. I will go in the same order as the chapters are ordered in. I will not go over all of the sidelines because there are far too many, and many of them are way too obscure. But I'll go over some of the main lines. Certainly, 3 bishop b5 check is one of them. Here, I recommend to stay within the same spirit of the whole opening of the whole series, to go for the more complex positions with knight d7. Keeping more pieces on the board. Bishop d7, of course, also equalizes, but I like to stay true to the spirit of the opening. Knight d7 is what I recommend. And now there are lots of options. Here we look at 3 main ones: c3, castle, and d4. If c3, white is aiming for a pawn center, we play knight f6 first. There is no comfortable way for him to protect the pawn. He has to go queen e2. Now we grab space on the queen side: a6, bishop a4, b5, bishop c2, bishop b7. Now white goes d4. Castling first would transpose. Anyway, he needs to play d4 sooner or later. And here I give 2 options in the chapter, but I like the move g6 here. After castle, bishop g7, I think bishop is quite well placed here. White has always e5 options, after which we take on f3, double white's pawns. After d, we can move the knight to h5 or d5. And these complex positions are roughly balanced. White has horrible pawn structure on the king side, but does have the bishop pair, so it's complex. Here I look at the move rook e1, castle knight d2. What if white just plays simple, but against exactly that, our setup is perfect. The bishop on g7 is well placed. Pawn on g6 is going to be beautifully placed once the knight lands on g3, as it will guard the f5 square. So here I propose to start with queen c7, knight f1, rook a c8, get one more tempo on the c2 bishop, as we now threaten cd, and if cd, the bishop is hanging. And now after bishop moves one more time, we can take on d4 first, and after cd, go for e5, clarify the position, threaten ed4 and rook e8, and if d5, we have the c5 square for the knight. We have already our bishop nicely placed on g7, currently threatening bishop d5, ed, e4. And if white drops the bishop back, then we can activate this bishop by means of b4, a5, and bishop a6. And we have a tremendous version of a closed Spanish, and I explain a lot more about all these positions and intricacies, of course, in the bishop d5 check chapter. But for now, I think we are well equipped to start our knight of journey here. 4d4 is one of the main moves. White is going for some sort of an open Sicilian, but a very different one. After cd queen d4, he has now a centralized queen, and with bishop b5, knight d7 included, we cannot attack the queen with knight c6. That's the point. Here we play a6, forcing a decision from the bishop. Bishop d7 is the main move. Bishop d7, and now there are three different options. Against castle and c4, I recommend to play knight f6. And against knight c3, knight f6 is too dangerous because of bishop g5 and long castle. So against knight c3, I recommend the move e5, as we'll see. So first of all, c4, yeah, they're going for the Marosi bind. Now we go knight f6. If knight c3, we go g6, bishop g7, castle, and then eventually we'll hope for a good b5 push. If bishop g5, stopping g6, we go for e6, knight c3, bishop e7, castle, castle, rook of d1. And here it's important not to fall for bishop f6, bishop f6, e5, as the bishop is hanging. Go first, bishop c6, then later prepare this counterplay with b5. Black has plenty of play here, thanks to this bishop pair. If castle, we play once again knight f6. We want to play again g6. If bishop g5, we play e6. And here we have to know just a couple of things. C4 will be similar to what we had seen 7 c4 just a few seconds ago. We go bishop e7, castle, and bishop c6. Knight b2 intending knight c4 is well met by bishop c6, knight c4, and now we can play for complications with bishop e7, bishop f6, gf. The structure always leads to very complex struggles, but I like the simple bishop takes e4, solving the problems. If bishop f6, queen e6, queen f6, queen e4, the idea is to win back the piece with a fork, d5, and after queen e2 takes bishop e7, black is comfortably equal here. Knight c3 is not so dangerous, but there is one trick. We play bishop e6. If we play bishop e7, which is possible, we have to play these structures that are, again, excellent for a must-win situation because it gives you lots of dynamic possibilities. You have the bishop pair and an open g-file, but of course, yeah, this is not ideal, and the king safety is slightly compromised. Safer is bishop e6. Now, if white plays slow, we will just develop and castle. So knight d5 is challenging. And now we don't panic, we take the piece, ed, bishop comes back to d7, and if rook e1, we go bishop e7, bishop f6, gf, queen f6, and after rook g8, we have an extra piece, and rook e7, queen e7, rook e1 can be met by bishop e6, and we don't lose our queen. And these complications are only enough for white for equality. You can find more in the chapter, but overall, nothing to worry about here. 7 knight c3 is trickier because if you go knight f6, there is bishop g5 and then long castle. That's very dangerous. Here I recommend e5. Queen d3, rook c8, a useful move. Always useful, bringing the rook to the c file in the knight of castle h6, prepare knight f6, stop bishop g5. And white goes knight d2. White is trying to reroute this knight towards e3, where it will contribute to the fight for the d5 square. Here I recommend queen c7, stopping knight c4. White goes usually rook d1, intending knight f1, knight e3. And now a very strong nuance that I introduced against Michael Adams already 4 years ago, 2016. A very strong nuance, bishop g4, provoking this move f3. And now the idea is quite far-fetched. After bishop e6, knight f1, knight f6, knight e3. Bishop e7, we just develop. We want to castle. a4, white stops b5 advance, which was also one of our ideas. Castle, bishop d2. And now we play rook f d8. And next we go d5. And it's very important to have, that we have provoked the f3 push, because after bishop e1, d5, and e d5, we have bishop c5, pinning this e3 knight, and that is the whole point of having provoked the f3 pawn, because now we will regain the d5 pawn and have a very comfortable position, having gotten rid of the d6 weakness. So that is the important solution for d4. In case of 4 short castle, we will go for a6 first. It's a better move order. If knight f6, rook e1, a6, there is the option of bishop to f1. So we play a6 first. And now bishop d3, bishop d7, d4 leads to the same thing as the early for d4, which we just looked at. Castle bishop a6, bishop d3 is the principal line. Now we develop the knight f6, and now white goes for c3, bishop c2, rook e1, d4 idea in some order. c3 first, we go b5. This bishop c2, bishop b7, rook e1 will transpose. The only independent idea here is move a4, which is very interesting. Now we go bishop b7. We always respond to a4 with bishop b7, and after ab, rook a8, we take with the queen, reinforcing pressure on the e4 pawn. And after bishop b5, bishop b4, white has an interesting piece sack, d4. We take the piece dc, and after bishop b4, white has actually enough compensation for the piece, and you can study this in a designated chapter, a very interesting little sideline by white. 6 rook e1 is the main move. The point is that now, if you play b5, white has the option of c4. So here, at some point, black came up with a clever move order e6. Now, after c3, we go b5, and c4 is no longer, of course, there, with white having lost a full tempo on c3. Here, white goes bishop c2. Again, if a4, we go bishop b7, not c4, because then white can drop the bishop to the other diagonal. So we go bishop b7, and only after bishop c2 do we go c4. And likewise, after bishop c2, c4 is the move we play. Now b3 is not dangerous. Bishop b7, bc, bc. We will protect the c4 pawn twice if need be. Knight a3, rook c8, queen 2, queen c7. There's no problem. Yeah, it's well guarded. And a4 is most critical. Now we go bishop b7, and the main move is d4, cd. Queen d3. If bishop d3, we just take ba3, ba4, queen d3. Now knight c5, queen d2. ba4 is a safer option. And after bishop e3, intending to take on c5 and then take on a4, the easiest is knight fd7. If bishop d4, now we play e5, and if bishop c5 right away, we take knight c5. And after rook takes a4, we don't go for this exchange sack because it's too dangerous for us with the king on e7, but play g6. And the idea is that rook d4 can be met by bishop g7. If e5, we can take on f3, queen f3, play d5. And it all works out well for black. Of course, more details are in the bishop d5 check chapter, but here I think you got a very good quick overview of what we are up to. There are other third move options. Let's go over them very quickly. There is bishop c4. It's a pretty common sideline here. It's important to get the move order straight. Knight f6, first hitting the e4 pawn, not allowing white to castle and play rook e1. So white plays d3. Now we go knight c6. Important to start with knight c6 because g6, e5, d knight e5 allows white to put a lot of pressure, and that is actually a trap one can fall into. I fell into it against Magnus Carlsen once in this game. You should play knight c6. Protect from e5 first. And after castle, now g6 is pretty good. White usually goes for c3, bishop d7, bishop b3 setup. Now we castle, rook e1. We start expanding on the queen side with b5. h3, white needs h3 to push d4, otherwise we would take and play bishop g4, putting pressure along the diagonal and fighting for the d4 square. And here after h3, d4 is coming. So we go for our queen side space, we go a5, d4, a4. We have lots of space on the queen side, compensating for the space white has in the center. And after bishop c2, knight d7, we keep the tension. We don't want to trade yet, not allowing white to bring the knight to c3. And after bishop e3, bishop b7, it's not easy for white to develop, as knight bd2 can be met by a3 when his pawn chain is getting broken. So yeah, these annoying queenside pawns is quite something that we have in return for the center. Pretty good position for black. Third c3 is also something to know. Knight f6 is important. Now d4 is met by capture, but please beware, we're not threatening knight e4 yet because of queen a4 check, a well-known trap. h3 is one of the main setups. We go knight c6, bishop d3, and here bishop d3, yeah, that's white's idea, bishop c2 and d4. Here I recommend e5, bishop c2, and now a less common move, but a very simple move, g6. Main move is d5, it's more complicated. g6 is quite simple. If d4, we just take twice, edc, dcd, knight d4, then develop bishop g7, castle, castle. Our d6 pawn is backward, but d5 is inevitable. And after knight c3, d5, things get really simplified. ed, we take knight d5, knight c6, we take bc. Our bishop on g7 is very strong. And yeah, I think this is an easy solution to this setup with h3. As for 4 bishop e2, it's important first of all not to take on e4 once again because of queen a4 check, and also not to go knight c6 because of d4, and then if knight e4 there is d5 and queen a4 check again wins material, so this is dangerous. Bishop e2 we just play g6, castle we go bishop g7, again white cannot push d4 because e4 is hanging. If he goes queen c2 trying to push d4 we have queen c7, important idea, d4 cd is there, cd there is a queen hanging. So the main move is bishop b5 check, knight c6, now white gets d4, using the fact that d5 is a threat. We castle d5 and now a strong intermezzo a6. Better to start with it because if knight a5, white has rook e1, a6, and then bishop to f1. Strong intermezzo is a6, bishop d3, and now knight a5. Knight is fine on a5 for now. We'll try to rescue it with b5 and e6. Bishop g5, now we go b5. Knight bd2, white develops harmoniously, but now we are fighting for central control. First we kick the bishop, h6, bishop h4, and now e6. Hitting the d5 pawn. If white trades, we'll get our knight back either via c6 or c4. And if rook e1, we go rook e8, brace for, prepare for trades. Knight f1, now we take, rook e1, queen e1. And we solve the issue of this a5 knight by playing c4 now or even, or eventually, but it's fine to do it right now. And after bishop c2, we bring the knight into the game with knight b7, knight c5. And we have no bad pieces left. And good pressure on the d5 pawn. I think this covers the third move, sidelines. Now let's look at two options on the second move. Here I look only at the knight c3 and the c3 move, which is called the Alapin. There are a bunch of sidelines in the second move sideline chapters, but they are not all too relevant and don't occur that often, so don't have to worry. Let's look briefly at 2 knight c3. This usually means that white doesn't want to go for the open Sicilian. I recommend d6. There is a funky line d4. This has been played by Magnus Carlsen against Wojtaszek in Championship 2018. A funky line. The idea is to go cd, queen d4, knight c6, and now queen d2. And white wants to go b3, bishop b2, and long castle. It's a fascinating setup. Here we go g6, b3, bishop h6, hitting the queen with the tempo. f4, knight f6, finish development of our king side. Bishop b2, castle, long castle. And now we start counterplay in the center. First e5. Hitting the f4 pawn, g3, and now rook e8, preparing ef4 and also to throw the knight into the center with knight d4. For example, after king b1, go knight d4, knight g2, and now bishop g4. We have lots of pins on the on these diagonals, and complications work out for us. After knight d4, ed, queen d4, we don't go for the exchange. Bishop d1, knight d1, white has good positional compensation, but we start with bishop g7, threatening knight d4, and yeah, white doesn't have anything more than equality in the complications, as you can find out from the 3d4 chapter. But of course, this is quite rare, although at high level it's pretty fashionable thanks to efforts of Magnus Carlsen. He won that game brilliantly. There are a couple other options here. There's the Grand Prix attack with f4. After f4, we go g6 first. Knight c6 first allows bishop b5. We go for the gancetto directly. Knight f3, bishop g7, and here there are two main moves. There is the direct bishop c4 setup, and there's also bishop b5 check first, and then bishop c4. Yeah, this setup is the so-called Grand Prix attack, quite venomous, but if we know what we're doing just fine. So if bishop b5 first, we go bishop d7, bishop c4 now, knight c6, castle, e6, and white's idea is that after d3, knight g7, f5, this is a typical pawn sacrifice for the line. If we now take e5, queen e1, intending to meet castle with queen h4. With bishop on c8, we play here h6, but now there is bishop f4 hitting the d6 pawn. So that was the whole point of provoking bishop d7. But if you know that we can just castle here, and yeah, there is no danger to the e6 pawn. And now if white goes queen e1, we take with the g pawn, a typical capture. The same happens with the bishop on c8. After queen h4, we go fe4. We have the time for that. Knight g5, we have h6. And if d4, we go knight g6. Always happy to trade queens, of course. And if queen h5, we have knight ce5. We are in time. Knight g5, again, there is h6. And once we trade these knights, e5 and f3 knight, white will have not enough attacking potential on the king side. Besides, we want to take and play queen h4, offering a trade of queens sometimes as well. That's for bishop b5 first. If bishop c4 first, we have knight c6, castle e6 again. Knight comes to e7 once again. d3, knight g7. Now f5, we can take ef, queen 1, h6. There is no more attack on the d6 pawn as the pawn is now protected. And if 8 queen e1 we castle. If now f5, again the same thing, gf, queen h4, fed, knight g6, queen h5, knight c5. And if 9 queen h4, we have the time to address this f5 threat with d5 first, bishop b3, now knight d4. Very forcing move. And if knight takes d4, we take with the bishop. And after king h1, we stop f5 once and for all by pushing f5. Now if e5, we take on c3, bc, b6, and then the bishop on b3 is out of play completely. And if e d5, knight d5, queen d8, rook d8, we reach a roughly equal endgame, and there is nothing left of white's Grand Prix attack but a set pawn on f4. That is for the Grand Prix attack. Finally, there is also a closed Sicilian setup. There are two of them. There is a g3 and knight ge2 first. So if g3 first, we just go knight c6, bishop g2, g6. We fence out the bishop, d3, bishop g7. Bishop b3 is the most common setup with queen d2. Other setups can be found, of course, in the chapter designated especially for this. Here we go rook b8. We're preparing queenside push. Remain flexible with our knight on g8. Queen d2, b5. Knight e2, b4, knight d1, now knight d4. We're always happy to trade the d4 knight for the e2 knight. In case of c3, we just take twice and trade. And here, after castle, I propose a strong new idea. If you play e6, then white goes knight c1, knight e7, kicks the knight away with c3, knight c6. Let me show you that. And then trades bishops with bishop h6, and this position is a little bit unpleasant. So I recommend a very strong idea, h5 first. We pretend that we want to push h4, which we want, of course, but after h3, now we go simply for e6, and now after knight c1, knight e7, c3, knight c6, there is no more bishop h6 happening, and so white doesn't have a follow-up. Next, we want to play a5, a4, bishop a6, and as soon as white goes f4, we can already castle, and there is no more bishop h6. So yeah, very, very clever idea to include h5, take out this white's only idea. 3 knight g2 is different. Now we play knight f6. We're ready to transpose to knight f after d4, takes and a6. Now white can play g3, we go g6. We can start with knight c6 and then g6 is the same thing. Now white can go into the dragon with pawn on g3 and bishop g2 setup, which is not very dangerous against the dragon. So here we're fine. Take. I recommend knight c6. Important not to fall into bishop g2, bishop g7, take, e5. So here after bishop g2, I recommend to take on d4, queen d4, and now bishop g7, and after castle, we will have lots of counterplay on the queen side, and we will use the fact that the queen on d4 is misplaced. After queen d1, we will hit it with bishop g4, after queen b4, we hit it with a5, gaining more tempi on the queen, annoying it, and after queen d3, we go knight d7, ready to hit it with knight e5, and after knight d5, e6, knight e3, play knight c5, if queen a2, we go b6, and hit the weakened e4 pawn with bishop b7. So these dragon positions are fine. If knight d2, which is the old main line, keeping all the knights, we play bishop g7, bishop g2, finish our development, castle, and now we go for the b5 plan with rook b8, and after a4 we anyway go for b5 plan with a6, knight d5, the main line, b5, ab, bishop g5. Well, I put some pressure on the f6 knight, but we can just dodge it with main line is knight d7, but I like even more knight g4, guarding also the e3 and h6 squares, and after queen c1, h6, the extra option we have now, the knight is on g4. If bishop d2, can play king h7, protect the h6 pawn, and now after h3 we can play knight e5, and next we will kick out the knight from d5 with e6 at any moment, and also we can advance on the queen side with b4. Very comfortable position for black. There's dragon with g3. Bishop g2, knight c6. Knight c6 is important for our move order. Bishop g7, d4 move orders us into something slightly different. Knight c6 we play first, castle, bishop g7, and now white can play d3. This is the close Sicilian, but a different one. Our knight is committed to f6, white knight committed to e2. Here I recommend castle. h3 usually played a very important, useful move sooner or later. First of all against knight g4 after bishop e3, but also to support g4 push. And after rook b8, white plays f4. Now b5 is met by e5. So we have to prepare for it. I recommend knight d7. Preparing for b5, and also after f5, knight is always controlling the e5 square. a4 we go a6. And now a modern plan is to go knight d5. Knight reroutes to e3, and white gets the control over the d4 square with c3. But we have our play on the queen side with e6, knight e3, b5. And after ab, We can always meet c3 with b4, and next we want to play bishop b7, rook a8, fight also for the a file. And the complications seem to be all right for black. f5 always weakens the e5 square. So all in all, close Sicilian, not killing us. And there is, of course, even more details in the chapter. And finally, let's look at the Alapin. After c3, I recommend simple knight f6. There are two systems here with d5 or knight f6. We have to stop white from getting the pawn center with d4. Knight f6 is my recommendation, e5, knight d5. There are different orders, but basically we want to meet bishop c4 with knight b6 and knight f3 or d4 with d6, immediately targeting the exposed e5 pawn. Bishop c4 we play knight b6. After bishop b3 we hit him with c4, bishop c2, d5, knight e5, queen d5, very forced solution. If queen e2, sacrificing the g2 pawn, we have a simple solution in f6, knight f3, and queen e6. We want to trade queens and then play e5 and develop swiftly. If white plays 5d4, we take on d4, play knight c6. And now white follows up with bishop c4, knight b6, again hitting the c4 bishop. And now there are two options. Bishop b3 is tricky. I faced it once on my YouTube stream against a not very well-known player, and I got into some trouble, but then I studied it, and when I faced it against Shahryar Mamediyarov in an important online Olympiad game, I was already well prepared, so I was lucky there. I played d5, knight a5, knight c3, now I took, and e6, undermining the d5 pawn, solving the problems. After knight e5, ed, bishop e3, white is intending long castle in some cases. We go bishop d6, 4, queen b5 check first, sorry. Now bishop d7, knight d7, queen d7, long castle is tricky, so we have to play king f8, but we keep the extra pawn, and after f4, bishop e6, castle, king g8, moving out of f5. We had this very double-edged position. I played it against Shahryar, and black has an extra pawn. The only problem is the h8 rook, but it's going to be solved with h5, h4 next, and that's what happened. Eventually, my rook landed on h5, then f5, and I got a good position. You can find all that in the Alapin chapter in even more details. Bishop b5 is the main line, pinning the knight. Now we take on e5, knight e5, and play bishop d7, securing the c6 knight. And after knight d7, queen d7, white goes castle, knight c3. In some order, we go e6, knight c3. And here is one important nuance. If you start with bishop e7, the white plays queen g4, castle, and then takes on c6 and plays bishop h6 in one go, which is a little bit threatening. So we play rook d8 first. Very important. Take out the queen g4 idea, which now doesn't threaten anything. And if bishop e3, we play bishop e7, and after queen g4 castle. Now bishop c6 bc, we have gained the extra move rook d8, so bishop h6 is no longer good. And in general, with this little finesse, 12 rook d8, we solve all our opening problems, and the line continues a little bit. You can find it in the Alapin chapter, but overall black is doing very fine, and is very comfortable. I think we did the impossible here, guys, and we've covered all of the Najdorf in just a little bit over an hour. So I think that's been fantastic. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching, and good luck with the Najdorf. I hope you will study also the other chapters. There are lots and lots of exciting details, alternatives, options, and variations. In particular, the 6 bishop e3 line is very big. The English attack chapter is very big and exciting, and here I gave a very brief overview of that. I think that's definitely something you should explore much more. And also, of course, bishop g5 chapters are very big. You can also explore them further, also very important ones. And there's everywhere something exciting, but I think these two should be the priority right now. All in all, thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapters. Bye-bye.